Imagine for a second that you're walking through a really dense fog.
Hmm.
You can't see the path, the trees are just blurry shapes, the sounds are muffled, and you have no idea where true north is.
Right.
For a lot of very rational, logical people, that is exactly what spirituality feels like. It feels vague, misty. It's a mood, not a fact.
For sure. It's usually categorized as, faith or mysticism. We tend to put it in a completely separate box from the hard, cold world of data and rigid mathematics.
Exactly. But what if that distinction is, well, what if it's artificial? We're looking at a fascinating stack of research today that argues something pretty radical.
A very bold premise.
It argues that spirituality isn't a vague concept at all. It claims that what ancient sages were doing was actually precise mathematics
Yeah.
that we're only now, getting the technology to verify.
It is bold. We're essentially asking, what if the lab coat and the saffron robe are actually studying the exact same thing, just with different vocabularies?
And that's the mission for this deep dive. We are tackling the ultimate question, who am I? But not with poetry or wishful thinking. We're going to look at how Nobel Prize-winning physicists are arguably arriving at the exact same conclusions as thinkers like Adi Shankaracharya.
It's a journey, really, from the subatomic particle all the way to the structure of the human psyche.
So let's just jump right into the deep end. The source material anchors this whole argument in quantum physics,
Of course.
specifically the famous observer effect. Now, I think most people have heard this term, loosely thrown around in pop culture.
Oh, absolutely. Usually to justify magic or manifesting money or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. But let's strip away the woo-woo. What is the actual science here?
So to understand the observer effect, you have to look at the double slit experiment. This is really the gateway drug to all the quantum weirdness.
Yep.
In the classical world, the world of Isaac Newton, if you throw a tennis ball, it exists in one place, it travels in a line, it hits a wall. Simple.
Right. It's a solid object. It has a zip code.
Exactly. But when physicists started looking at the subatomic world electrons, photons, they realized they don't behave like tennis balls at all.
How so?
When it's unobserved, an electron behaves like a wave. It isn't in one place. It is in a state of superposition. It is essentially in all possible places at once, like a cloud of probability.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure we nail this down because this is where people usually get lost, myself included. You're saying the electron isn't physically there until we look at it.
Roughly, yes. And this is the standard Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. The act of measurement, the act of observation is what causes that wave of probability to collapse into a single definite particle.
So before you look, it's potential. After you look, it's reality.
That's it.
This is the part that sounds like magic to me. It implies the universe isn't some pre-existing stage that we just walked onto. It suggests the audience is actually building the set just by looking at it.
That is the mind-bending implication. And this is where the source draws that direct parallel to the Hindu concept of drishta.
Drishta, meaning the observer.
Exactly. In systems like Vedanta, there's always been this sharp distinction between the seer and the seen. And the ancient claim is that the seer isn't passive.
Right.
The consciousness of the observer is the fundamental thing that allows the seen, the material world, to even manifest.
But let me push back on that for a second. If I close my eyes, does the world disappear? I mean, that's the classic solipsism trap, right? Einstein famously asked a colleague, do you really believe the moon isn't there when you aren't looking at it?
He did, and it's a valid pushback, but the source clarifies that we aren't necessarily talking about your individual human ego creating the moon.
Okay.
We're not saying that if John Smith closes his eyes, the universe just dissolves. We're talking about consciousness with a capital C, a fundamental field of awareness that permeates everything.
I see.
The double slit experiment is just the physical proof that matter needs an interaction with a measurement system, an observer, to take a definite form.
So matter isn't the building block of the universe. Consciousness is.
That's the argument. If you need the observer to collapse the wave function to even get matter, then the observer consciousness must be primary. It flips the whole materialist worldview on its head.
Right, because we usually think Big Bang happens, rocks form, biology happens, brain evolves, and poof, consciousness appears at the very end.
Exactly. This view says, no, consciousness is the screen upon which all that other stuff is projected.
Which is a perfect transition to the man who really formalized a lot of this math, Erwin Schrödinger.
The father of quantum mechanics?
Now, I always picture Schrödinger as this, austere Austrian academic scribbling equations about cats in boxes. But the source material highlights a side of him that was totally new to me. He wasn't just a casual fan of Eastern philosophy, he was deeply committed to it.
He was, and it's something that gets, well, kind of scrubbed from a lot of physics textbooks because it makes modern academia a little uncomfortable. Schrödinger was a devoted student of the Upanishads. Oh, yeah. He famously said that the multiplicity we see in the universe is only apparent. In truth, there is only one mind.
Consciousness is one. It only seems divided into many parts. That's the quote our source pulled.
Right. And for Schrödinger, this wasn't some, religious belief he just slapped on top of his science. It was a conclusion he felt was derived from his science.
How so? I mean, how does studying atoms lead you to one mind?
Well, think about that wave function we just discussed. If all particles are fundamentally waves of energy, interconnected and tangled, then the boundaries between this atom and that atom they're kind of arbitrary.
Okay.
You zoom out far enough, it's all one continuous field. Schrödinger saw that the separation between you and me, subject and object, was a biological illusion, not a fundamental physical reality.
This connects directly to the concept of Advaita, or non-duality.
Yes, Advaita, literally not two.
It's such a difficult concept to grasp because my experience feels very dualistic. I am here, the microphone is there, you are over there, we feel distinct.
We do. And the source uses a great analogy for this. Think of a city at night. You see millions of lights, windows, street lamps, cars.
Right, millions of little points of light.
They all look like separate sources of illumination, but if you trace all the wires back, they're all being fed by one single power plant.
Okay, I follow that. That makes sense.
Schrödinger is basically saying we are the light bulbs. We look at each other and say, I am distinct from you. I'm a 60-watt bulb. You're an LED. But the electricity, the consciousness that's powering the whole experience, is the exact same current.
So when we ask, who am I? The answer isn't, I am this bulb. The answer is, I am the electricity.
Precisely. And that shifts your identity from something fragile and temporary, the body, the bulb, to something fundamental and eternal.
It's just wild to think that the guy who gave us the equations for modern chemistry and lasers was basically, preaching from the Vedas.
It really challenges the narrative that science and spirituality are enemies, doesn't it? In this case, the deeper the science went, the more spiritual it became.
Let's move to another physicist mentioned in the stack, Fritjof Capra. He wrote The Tao of Physics.
A classic. Capra was one of the first to really popularize this bridge between the East and the West back in the 70s.
The source brings up a specific visual here that I just love, the cosmic dance. It compares what's happening inside an atom to the Hindu iconography of Lord Shiva.
The Nataraja, the dancer in the Ring of Fire, it's such a powerful image. And it solves a specific problem in how we visualize matter.
Makes the problem.
We tend to think of atoms as little solar systems, a hard nucleus with little hard electrons orbiting it like planets.
Yeah, that's the model I learned in high school, the little plastic balls stuck together.
Right, the Bohr model. But it's wrong. Or at least it's very incomplete. The quantum reality is that particles are not static things. They are constantly popping into existence and vanishing. They're colliding, annihilating, and rebirthing. It's a chaotic, rhythmic flow of creation and destruction.
And that's the dance.
That is the dance. Capra looked at the bubble chamber tracks, these graphs of particle interactions, and he saw the rhythm of Shiva. He saw Shakti, the dynamic energy that creates and is the universe.
So the universe isn't made of stuff, it's made of flow.
Exactly. It's a process, not a structure. Think of a whirlpool in a river. You look at it and say, there is a whirlpool. It has a shape, a location, a size. But you can't reach in and pick up the whirlpool. It's just water moving in a certain way. If the movement stops, the thing vanishes.
That's a little terrifying. Because if I am the whirlpool,
then you are terrified of the flow stopping. You cling to your shape, you fight to keep the whirlpool spinning, but if you realize you are the water,
then the form doesn't matter. I'm still the water.
Right. This is where the physics offers a kind of psychological liberation. It moves you from identifying with the temporary form to identifying with the eternal substance.
Speaking of psychology, we have to pivot. We've looked at the outer world, the physics of the universe. But the source argues you can't answer who am I without looking at the software running inside our heads.
And here we meet Carl Jung,
the other giant of the 20th century. While Schrödinger was diving into the atom, Jung was diving into the dream.
That's a great way to put it.
So Jung is famous for the concept of the collective unconscious. Break that down for us. How does it fit with the physics we just talked about?
Well, remember Schrödinger's one mind. Jung basically found the psychological equivalent. He started noticing that his patients, it didn't matter what their culture, religion, or background was, they all had the same fundamental dream structures, the same symbols, the same myths.
These are the archetypes, right?
Exactly. The hero, the mother, the trickster. Jung concluded that our individual minds aren't isolated islands. We're more like an archipelago.
Okay.
We look separate on the surface, but underneath the water, we are all connected to the same seabed.
And the source maps this onto the Hindu concept of Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic mind.
It's striking how well they map. Chidala, in yoga philosophy, is mind stuff, the field of thought. Jung is essentially saying that just as there's a shared field of gravity that connects all physical bodies, there is a shared field of consciousness that connects all psychic bodies.
So my private thoughts, my anxieties, my dreams, they aren't entirely private.
They are personal ripples in a collective ocean. I mean, this is why you can have simultaneous discoveries in science, or why certain myths just resonate across totally different civilizations. We're all tapping into a shared database.
This leads us to the final and I think the most challenging part of the stack. We've talked about the universe and we've talked about the shared mind, but we still have a biological problem.
The brain.
The brain, the hard problem.
David Chalmers' term.
Right. The hard problem of consciousness, basically. How does a 3-pound chunk of gray meat inside my skull produce the feeling of being alive?
It is the absolute holy grail of neuroscience. We know that if I pinch you, a C fiber fires in your nerve, a signal goes to your brain, neurons light up in the cortex. We can map that mechanism perfectly. But
that doesn't explain why it hurts.
exactly, it doesn't explain the ouch. It doesn't explain the redness of a rose or the taste of chocolate. Those are qualia subjective experiences. There is nothing in the laws of physics that says complex data processing should feel like anything.
A computer processes data, but as far as we know, it doesn't feel sad when you delete a file.
Exactly. So how does the source material resolve this? Because this seems like a total dead end for materialist science.
It does.
It resolves it by completely flipping the function of the brain. The prevailing view is that the brain produces consciousness, like a factory produces smoke. The source argues for the receiver theory, which aligns perfectly with Hindu philosophy.
The brain is an antenna.
Yes. Think of a television set. You're watching a show, you see the actors, you hear the dialogue. If you smash the TV with a baseball bat, the picture goes away.
Right. The show is over.
But did you destroy the broadcast signal?
Yeah. The signal's still in the air.
Yeah.
You just broke the box that was decoding it.
Exactly. The receiver theory suggests that the brain is a biological reducing valve. It tunes into that fundamental field of consciousness, what they'd call Brahman, or what physics might call the unified field, and filters it down into this narrow, manageable stream that we call my life.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Because if the brain generates consciousness, then when the brain dies, I die. Lights out. End of story. But if the brain is just a receiver,
then death is just the breaking of the radio. The signal, the consciousness itself, remains intact.
it also reframes things like brain damage, too. The source mentions Alzheimer's. If the radio is damaged, the music comes through as static. It's distorted, but the source of the music is still flawless.
It's a much more compassionate view. It suggests that the person isn't gone or broken in their essence. Their biological interface is just malfunctioning.
It really does take spirituality out of the realm of, ghost stories and puts it into a framework that actually fits with things like field theory and information theory.
And that's the core argument of this entire deep dive. Theoretical physics and neuroscience are slowly circling the mountain and arriving at the very same peak that the yogis claim to have stood on thousands of years ago.
Science calls it a fundamental field. Spirituality calls it Brahman.
Different dialects, same reality.
So let's bring this all together. We've covered a lot of heavy ground. We started with the observer effect,
Which showed us that consciousness isn't a passive bystander. It is an active participant in shaping reality.
Then we had Schrödinger and the math of non-duality.
The revelation that our separation is an illusion. We are different expressions of a singular consciousness.
Then the cosmic dance and the flow of the universe.
Matter as energy. Identity as a fluid process rather than a static object.
And finally, the receiver theory of the brain.
The brain as a tuner, filtering an infinite consciousness down to a finite human experience.
It's a compelling case. The source's final verdict is that spirituality isn't a misty, vague wish. It's the physics of the invisible.
And practically it answers, who am I? In a very empowering way.
Yeah.
You aren't just a lonely biological machine fighting for survival in a dead universe. You are the universe, conscious of itself.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over, based on that radio analogy, is something that kept me up last night.
Okay.
If the receiver theory is true, if your brain is just tuning into a frequency of consciousness, what happens if you change the dial?
Right. We're all perfumed to station human.
Exactly. We perceive a tiny, tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. We call it visible light. We hear a tiny range of frequencies. If consciousness is infinite, are we just locked into one very narrow channel? What else is out there broadcasting right now, passing through this room, that we just don't have the hardware to pick up?
It makes you wonder if the mystics throughout history weren't hallucinating. Maybe they just figured out how to turn the knob.
Something to think about. Next time you're stuck in traffic or staring at the stars, you're the signal, not the radio. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.